It changed the mood, definitely. It's completely different. We usually drink a beer after away games. It's that long ago that I drank a beer, but we'll be probably drunk after the one. So, yes, it changed the mood completely, and it's good. But we all know who we are welcoming on Sunday, and this will be a different game. We know that, but it's better to go in a game with the feeling we got tonight than with any other.
Yeah, back-to-back crisis clubs for us here on the Analyst after the last 2 match weeks in the Premier League. But have things begun to turn around for Liverpool? A truly outstanding performance at times against Rangers the other day means that they'll come into their match on Sunday full of confidence. It just so happens they're playing Manchester City, a side that they haven't won against in their last 5 games in the Premier League. Joining me today on the Day to Day Live, Ollie Hopkins and Duncan Alexander, as we look forward to a big weekend of Premier League action, and also going to take a little bit of a dive into El Clasico this weekend as well. Talking about crisis clubs. Duncan, is it possible crisis clubs can become like European teams instead of like Premier League teams as well?
There is a niche hipster version of CL crisis clubs, yeah, which I think Barcelona probably fall into. But unlike Liverpool, or maybe the reverse of Liverpool, they're good in the league, as we'll discover. I mean, they've only let in 1 goal this season in the league. They've let in slightly more in the Champions League. So, but yeah, I think it's obviously a big game, as Drake would agree, I'm sure. So yeah, looking forward to that one.
Unfortunately, I would try and do some title puns of Drake music, but I know absolutely 0 of them. And all I thought when I saw it is oh, that's a nice tribute that Barcelona are paying to the old Sheffield Wednesday badge on the front of the jersey.
Yeah.
Well, you two, unbelievable. We've just actually published a piece on the Analyst from Tom Hancock looking at Real Madrid and Barcelona so far this season, and eagle-eyed readers will notice that all the subheadings are Drake songs, so something to check out there, as well as the piece, obviously.
Yeah, remember to read the piece, not just like notice all the song lyrics in there. But yeah, again, great bit of content for you on theanalyst.com for those of you watching on our YouTube, Twitch and Twitter channels. Welcome along. You can see some of the visuals going along with us. But if you're listening to us on the podcast on catch up afterwards, do make sure you head over to the home of data-driven storytelling. That is theanalyst.com for more content like that and more. Right then, let's hold off talking much more about El Clasico for now. We'll come back to that because it is I think coming into the season, this was one that people were ringing in the calendar and going, this is going to be a huge weekend. This is going to be almost like title decider-esque weekend. Instead, it's kind of a very different story for Liverpool in the Premier League this season. Manchester City, as I say, looking very strong. Obviously not top of the table at the moment, but some interesting bits coming out from City in midweek, obviously. Players getting rested, and we've got a little bit of a quote from Guardiola that we can play for you in a little bit, where he tries to explain why some of the players weren't necessarily rested as such, but more just, actually got niggles and injuries, which is a potentially worrying time for the team as we're going into this spell, as you say, where they're playing back-to-back games, and you've got this midweek Premier League run when probably most clubs would like a bit of a weekend off. Where do we want to start talking about?
Well, except for City, to be fair, because their game with Arsenal has been postponed, so Arsenal can essentially play almost a dead rubber in the Europa League. So, so City do actually have a week off, which I think could benefit them. Obviously not in points, but in terms of recuperation.
Yeah, I think, and again, it's all about deepness of squads at the moment. And I think we come back to the point we were talking about on Monday's show with Liverpool. Their squad have been allowed to get old all at the same time, effectively, and having that ability to go deep into your squad with young, fresher legs could be the key in this title battle at the end of the season. It might be where I think Arsenal maybe do tail off a little bit as the season rolls on. Is just, that the starting squad is outstanding. It's what happens after that. I think that it's just. They're going to probably need to do some recruitment in January. But again, you've got to then balance that you've got this really good first team. Players you're bringing in aren't necessarily going to be starters from day one. They're going to have to settle into being part of the squad rotation.
This is where your dad says, well, Aston Villa won the league in the early 80s, only using 14 players all season. And you have to point out that the world's changed. Football's faster. Indeed. Muscles are more delicate.
Ligaments as well. And this is one of my big theories, is that these days players are more obviously muscular than they've ever been, and sports science have done amazing bits on players' muscles. But I do think you do now. Ligaments haven't gone the same way. And we have someone on this call who's well known for doing ligament damage when he plays football. But I do think there is something in that players' ligaments are getting more and more strained these days because the muscle on the body is strong, and maybe the ligaments aren't being Richard Freeman helped as they sort of develop and get better as well.
Well, as someone who's just recently sprained the ankle ligaments, I can vouch for that, and I can find solace with Trent Alexander-Arnold, who obviously kind of went over on his ankle last weekend against Arsenal. It looked like quite a painful one, and he is one of 3, I guess, new injuries that they have to deal with in their squad, with Luis Diaz out, for a while with a knee injury, John Matip out now as well. So I think as well as the squad, getting on and aging, and those players sort of leaving their peak years, I think you've just got a lot of people also who are injured as well. So I think it's going to be a real test for the Reds this weekend. I mean, one thing that a few people have mentioned is it feels like Liverpool have dropped off a little bit in terms of their intensity of their pressing, and that is the case. I mean, the numbers do show that as well. They are making almost 2 fewer high turnovers per game versus last season, fewer press sequences, and then generally speaking, making fewer defensive actions. So tackles, duels, that sort of thing. I know that can be linked to whether you've got the ball or not, but kind of generally speaking, over the kind of course of matches, they are making their opponents work a little bit less when they got the ball. So that could be a result of an aging squad, of a squad that's kind of suffering with a few niggles here and there, and maybe they are just getting slightly burnt out by kind of sort of Klopp's relentless kind of full metal football, as he calls it.
Yeah, well, I have wondered. Obviously, Klopp's been around in the Premier League for quite a while now, and our opposition's now just learning how to deal with the breakdown. Right now, Pep Guardiola's obviously been able to change this season with Haaland coming into the team, throwing a very different look in there. And we spoke about it on Monday about how De Bruyne and such is able to really enhance the squad there. But are we getting to a tipping point with Klopp now, where actually teams are like, you know what, if he doesn't change even slightly, we know the playbook. We know what we can go into each game day and go, right, this is how they're going to set up.
Yeah, possibly. Although fellow analyst writer Sam Maguire did a quite good thread on Twitter yesterday about how everyone knows that Salah's been quite isolated this season, and he was theorising that possibly Liverpool planned to not have him this year, to sell him this summer. Bought Nunez, planned to shift it quite a lot, and then actually ended up keeping Salah because he did sign a new contract. So they're kind of having to sort of amalgamate a new approach with the old approach, which hasn't worked so far. I think it's fair to say, and I think it's interesting that when Salah came on and did score his record-breaking 6-minute 12-second hat-trick on Wednesday night at Rangers, he did play pretty centrally, and it immediately looked like the player we know from the last 4 or 5 seasons. So I think Klopp's too good a manager to have just rolled it into pre-season and gone, well, it's worked for a bit, let's just carry on, lads. Because I think football teams do constantly evolve, and particularly the top teams. I was trying to think actually which successful Premier League team didn't change for the longest time. I don't know, people will have their own opinions. Obviously Manchester United had a 4-4-2 early on, which they then dropped one of the strikers a bit deeper, and then obviously to sort of become more successful in Europe, Ferguson brought in players like Varane and did sort of go to a 4-5-1. But I reckon it's probably Arsenal, the peak Wenger Arsenal team with Henry and Perez. That pretty much plays the same way, I think, for 3, 4, 5 seasons, and it was obviously very good. Some people might have heard they went unbeaten for one of them, but yeah, that seems like the kind of longest unshakable team. Obviously, there would have been switches within games and within seasons and with different players, but I think as an overall philosophy, that feels like one of the most stable. Maybe no, not even Mourinho, because that wasn't too long. He only had a couple of seasons of that sort of peak 4-3-3. So yeah, I think Liverpool are in a transitional period, as we've said, but they're going to be well up for this game against City, and these are very much kind of state of the nation. I think if people accept that the Premier League is the leading league in the world at the moment, then this is the sort of demonstration of what the cutting edge. Even with Liverpool struggling a little bit, they still they'll turn up, and I think the atmosphere at Anfield will be, let's say, a little bit better than it was for the Brighton game or some of the other home games this season.
And I think there's another reason for Liverpool to get excited about this game, especially if our supercomputer is to be believed, because for the first time I can remember now, Duncan obviously has a very close relationship. We actually have a dead heat here, both Liverpool and City, both being given a 35.9% chance of winning this game. Yeah,
I don't think I've seen that. I gave the supercomputer a couple of hits to see if it was hedging its bets. Don't know if machines understand that concept.
Was it shorting the win? Was it, or slightly better?
I don't know. I wouldn't know. But yeah, I think obviously you can make a very good argument that Liverpool historically haven't lost at Anfield for a long time. Other than that weird 6 games in a row spell that obviously ended another massive long unbeaten run. City aren't, as you said earlier, Graham, they're top of most categories, but they're not top of the league. They have dropped points in 2 games this season. I mean, we all know that the first goal is going to be huge because Liverpool struggle to come back once they've done that, particularly in the Premier League. But yeah, I think these games are, I remember, was it 17-18 or 18-19 when City were quite a way ahead of Liverpool, but Liverpool smashed them in the league, obviously not them out of the Champions League as well. So these games don't always go to form, and older listeners might remember in the 80s when Liverpool were dominant, Manchester United had quite a good record against them, and vice versa. Liverpool had quite a good record against United when they were dominant in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. So yeah, in conclusion, I respect the findings of the supercomputer.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt in my mind. There's almost something going to be interesting about this Liverpool team this season. They're going to be that. I'm not going to call them the wounded animal, but I'm going to call them a wounded animal. Like, they've got the option here in games to. They're kind of out. The Klopp's even said they're out the title race now. So really, it's all about securing top 4. So obviously, they're going to be winning games such like. But games like this City one, I'm not saying for a second they're going to come in undercooking this, but there will be it's a potential game where Liverpool put up a 4-1 win, and everyone's going to be turning around next weekend and going, on Monday when we're doing the show, we're going to be talking about, City are now in, not crisis, but this was a real blow to them. And the same could happen to Arsenal down the line as well. Obviously, it was a close one between Arsenal and Liverpool the other day. That's the sort of game Liverpool could pick up a victory in, and everyone going, well, actually, they're going to cause problems for everybody else in that title race at the top.
I think whenever you can field a front 4 of Nunez, Jota, Salah, and Diaz. Obviously now Diaz is injured, but that's loaded in terms of attacking firepower and ability to create chances out of nothing, and to win you games, even if you're not necessarily playing that well. So yeah, I think for anyone to suggest that Liverpool are suddenly not going to be a threat in this game, but also kind of going forwards, I think would be a silly thing to say.
The one player you didn't mention there, Ollie, was Firmino, who's only one goal behind Haaland for October. Haaland's on 6, Firmino's on 5. So without his goals this season, I think Liverpool would be a lot worse off. And he has been really, really good for them in finishing. At least his finish away at Arsenal last week was an excellent. I think it was Liverpool's only shot on target of the whole second half, but it was a good one. And like you say, Jota came on and got a hat-trick of assists for Salah as well at Rangers. So, I mean, we were here last week, weren't we, sort of saying, don't think you can read beating Rangers too much into that. But I think it was a more upbeat performance in the away game. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those days, isn't it? You got the Clasico and Liverpool City sadly going on concurrently at some points. But yeah, big day.
Big day indeed. Right, let's just have a listen to Pep Guardiola as he talks through some of the injury problems that he's got with his City side at the moment.
Yeah, I thought about that. Yeah, right. But many players didn't start today because they were really, really exhausted and tired and fatigued and some niggles. And of course, I didn't want. Erling didn't feel really good after the game against Southampton. Phil have also some disturbing problems. Bernardo was so tired yesterday, told us. So that's why the players they feel better.
They feel better after the rest on Wednesday night, but disturbing problems for Phil. Don't know what those are. And Erling the robot apparently gets tired. So, it's all... it will be interesting to see how that City team comes out this weekend. Obviously, a little bit of a break for some of those key players will be key coming into this game. But, they're going to have to be switched on. Let's just have a quick look at the rest of the Premier League action this weekend and just draw out anything else that we want to from these predictions. Once again, Supercomputer going for a Leicester win. I'm not backing that. I think Palace at least are going to nick a draw in that one at the moment. I just feel that it's the pathway we're on with Leicester, and we're going to get to this point where Brenner out and all these various scoreboard messages that fans of the Fox has been trying to put through. Yeah, it might be just a bit more drawn out than they might have hoped for.
I mean, the thing I pointed out in the predictions piece was, this is sort of Eze against James Maddison in kind of players that you kind of hope might make the World Cup squad, but probably won't. But yeah, I think this has got potential to be a very end-to-end game. I think Palace have looked, really good. Obviously, they've had this famously hard start, but won against Leeds last week. Leicester, I still think Leicester are much better than the results show, and I think obviously the win against Forest was good. Then they kind of blew a lead at Bournemouth, who no one understands how Bournemouth are doing what they're doing, but they are. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to this game. I think it'll be quite open. If you're a fan of defending corners, probably look away, but I think should be good.
There's plenty of other good games as well to look out for. Arsenal, obviously, an old world 1970s trip that will get everybody excited as they head up to Ellen Road for that one. A recent form against Leeds has been pretty impressive, especially at Ellen Road for the Gunners. So 40, just below 50% there for the Gunners to emerge victorious in that one. I don't think that's unfair. Wolves, though, obviously big week for them. Julian Lopetegui not deciding that he wants to make Molineux his new home to go to. Rumours today that a familiar friend is coming back in Nuno Espirito Santo, which would be quite the comeback. Dare I say, equivalent to what Watford would be able to do at certain times with their management style. Big favourites obviously against against the Nottingham Forest side at the moment. That it's looking fairly bleak for them, even if Steve Cooper gets handed a nice long extension to his contract.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that Ruben Neves injured? I think he is, and because obviously he's pretty good at shooting from long range, and Forest have already let in 10 goals from outside the box this season. So I mean, I think it sounds a bit harsh, but whoever loses that one, you kind of feel might be doomed. I know it's only October, but it does feel like this is a really big 6-pointer. I think Wolves famously obviously have scored 3 goals, but I think they're going to get, maybe boosted by the rumours that Nuno could be back, that they might click back into gear for this one.
And just one more game I want to pull up on this one, quite a good one for obviously Tottenham versus Everton this weekend. Antonio Conte as a manager in the Premier League has seen his side keep 6 clean sheets against Everton. Only one manager in the league has managed more against a single opponent when managing a side. Any guesses who that might be?
Well, it's not a guess because I know this stuff, but it's Roberto Mancini, another Italian. Catenaccio, bringing their Catenaccio over to our shores where we revel in, goals. That's not true. I like Italian football, but yeah, it's interesting that, that's. I think, Spurs fans are quite famous for sort of always thinking their team operates on the vortex of disappointment and unfairness, but they've got an amazingly good record against Everton. They've lost only one of their last 19 games against them. This match, Son and Kane are clicking. Richarlison, if he plays, is possibly going to be overexcited for this one. But yeah, I think Spurs they're looking kind of better game by game, and I think they're still in touch with the top 2, and they're the kind of the hipster outsider bet, I think, for the title, because unlike City and Arsenal, they do just grind out results. So if they do ever kind of click into some sort of expansive form, watch them go.
And also, they've got players who aren't afraid to break the modern norms of football as well when it comes to taking shots from outside the box.
But yeah, true. Someone asked me this on Twitter earlier, because noticed that Son had scored from outside the box with both feet, not at the same time. That would be unusual and semi-impossible, against Leicester in that big win they had, and asked how many times that happened in Premier League history. It's 14 or 15 times, but the last time before Son was Kane back in 2017. So it's obviously a Tottenham anti-XG thing going on, but the vast majority of them happened in the 2000s, and I thought that was quite interesting because it does. I don't think many players would shoot with their wrong foot from distance these days because they'll get shouted at by the coaching team. Like, why that? Not only are you shooting from an unproductive place, but you're doing so with your weaker foot. Now, A, Son doesn't have a weaker foot, and B, Spurs are often not that keen to get forward, so it makes sense for him. But yeah, we have maybe lost something there, like the art of the. There's players like Hasselbank, Steven Gerrard, James Beattie, probably chewing gum while they did it. Another lost art of football. Yeah, so I think this weekend, Premier League players, have a dig with your wrong foot. See what happens.
I agree. Let's see some great efforts with both foot sailing and flying into the net. Anyway, right, enough of the Premier League for now. Let's head over to El Clasico, the most played fixture in La Liga, and loads of data for us to get into. Really great piece went up on theanalyst.com earlier this week with a bit of a data viz look at the history of El Clasico. I'm not going to dive into too many of these, but a really interesting thing that throughout all this time in El Clasico, after all these games, both teams stand on 295 goals each. It's just one of those unique traits that comes along every so often. And at one point, obviously, Real were quite far ahead of Barca, but Barca have been pulling this back over time as well. Real have the more wins, 76 wins compared to Barcelona's 73, with 35 draws as well. Both teams obviously off to flying starts this season in La Liga as well. I think Real, it's the first time in years they've won this many games this deep into the start of the season. It might be like the early 90s or something like that. It's jumping out of my head from research I did earlier, and I don't want to look at my other screen to actually see what it actually is. But I seem to remember it's something. It is a very historic run that Real are on here. Barcelona, obviously, problems galore, and the roll of the dice may or may not have come off. We'll wait and see on that front. Certainly might not have come off financially for them, at least initially. But in La Liga, they are very much competitive in this. Robert Lewandowski in outstanding form as well for this side. So, yeah, I mean, where do we want to? What do we want to look at first in Real and Barcelona's game here?
I think maybe at Barcelona, it's just so strange how you can have a team, obviously doing so well in the league. In terms of the points on the board and the results, but then the manager himself coming out and saying how unhappy he is with their European performances. Maybe that shows that the fact that they've played significantly harder teams in Europe. I think they've had a very easy run to the start of the season, playing a lot of the bottom five teams, which probably has inflated both their XG for and against, and probably goes some way to suggest why they've only let in that singular goal. But the sort of the disparity between their league form and their form in Europe is quite stark. But probably a slight sort of indictment on the state of Spanish sort of domestic football presently versus Europe. I think as one of our colleagues, Robbie Dunn, has pointed out on the site ahead of this game, I think the fact that Barca are still relying on sort of an aging PK and Busquets duo axis in the middle of the team is, those two have been world class over the years, but I think now are really starting to show their age, particularly in an ever growing physical modern game. And I think Barcelona have really lost they felt the loss of Jules Koundé, who they got in from Sevilla over the summer, who's far more dynamic and a far better ball carrier now out of defence and stepping in. I think Barca like to keep their kind of two wide players nice and high and wide, which kind of creates space in the middle for their centre half to kind of bring the ball forwards. And I think Koundé is fantastic at that. I think he's going to be fit and back for Clasico. I think they're going to kind of run the risk and roll the dice, and hopefully he can go. But yeah, that lack of mobility from the kind of PK and Busquets pairing is I guess worrying, and probably not where Xavi really wants his kind of full first choice side to be honest.
Yeah, they've kind of they're kind of relying on the age-old football thing of having a keeper in great form and a big lad up front who can knock in goals. So Lewandowski's obviously settled into the team really well. He's scoring goals in both League and Champions League, and then Ter Stegen's got a goals prevented rate of only 4 goals in the Liga. Barcelona have let in 1 goal in the league this season, and that was Isak's goal before he left Sociedad for Newcastle. So essentially no one in the league this season still there has scored against Barcelona in the league. So that's not really sustainable. I think the defending that they've done in the Champions League is probably closer to their standard, maybe, but it's going to be somewhere in the middle. But yeah, this is a huge test. Obviously, they had a great win at Real last season, but I can't see that happening again. I mean, I think, as you say, Ollie, Real have had a much harder start based on opposition position, and yeah, I think their confidence will be high, and I think they're the favourites, definitely.
Yeah, and that's something that it's not the supercomputer, but it is the supercomputer's Spanish cousin, which I believe
supercomputer.
I believe it's actually El Supercomputadora, if we're going to be correct on this one. That's apologies to any Spaniards listening or watching there for that pronunciation, probably semi-close. But yeah, he's actually making Real Madrid the favourites, 41.9% Real expected to win this one. Barcelona and the draw are actually very close, just either side of the 29%. Barcelona 29.7% chance of a win, draw 28.4%. So very much backing the host to come out on top in this one. Very much hoping they'll pull this one through. And yeah, I think it's a statement game. We've got one here in England. Like it really is for both these sides. Real will be very keen to put Barcelona in the corner and go, no, we're going to run away with it this year. We want to be the big side and really have control of this.
Well, it's kind of a bit of a throwback season, isn't it? With Real and Barcelona 5 points clear of everyone else. I mean, that was kind of how we remember it in the I don't want to say good old days, a decade ago, in the sort of peak Messi and Ronaldo era. But obviously it's changed recently. But you look at teams like Sevilla and Atletico that have done well recently. They're both having terrible seasons, and it's reversed in England. We've had a few years of Liverpool and City being the top 2 by miles. They finished nearly 20 points ahead of everyone last season. But now this season, Liverpool struggling, and we've got new contenders, Spurs, Arsenal, Chelsea maybe under Potter, who are in good form and improving. So, it's funny how it's turned around. But I think, Real Madrid should win that game, just as City should win the Premier League this season.
There you go. Bold predictions. We're only at the 14th of October and already the bold ones are coming out on that front. Right then, I think we'll wrap it up there for today. I don't think there's much more to dive into. I'm off depressingly to Milton Keynes on Saturday to go see MK Dons Plymouth. I think mainly we're all expecting a Plymouth victory in this one, but also to see if there's going to be more Plymouth fans in the ground than Milton Keynes Don fans at the moment, because the Dons are on a horrendous run of form at the moment up there, and Plymouth are flying high. Dare I say it? Looking good.
Well, let's just hope they open up the other tier to Plymouth fans, which they didn't do for the playoff semi-final against Wycombe. Didn't work out for them, but take choices. So,
who have Wycombe got this weekend? Just quickly,
it's the points per game Super Clasico against Peterborough United, who were the team most upset with Wycombe getting into the playoffs in 2019-20 on points per game. So. There'll be 3.00 points up for grabs, and let's hope Wycombe can.
Indeed. Arsenal this weekend, Ollie, expecting just more points against Leeds, are we?
You have to do so, yeah. And I think if Arsenal win, obviously they go to 9 wins from 10 games, and the last 4 teams to win 9 out of their first 10 have all won the title. So what are we saying there? Are we saying that if Arsenal beat Leeds, then they're going to win Premier League? Maybe.
That works.
Reading this weekend, meanwhile, host West Bromwich Albion. Obviously, Steve Bruce been sacked as West Brom manager, much to the disdain of Andy Carroll, who was saying, it was a guaranteed 3 points has potentially gone out the window for us now. So quite punchy from the player who ended up playing for West Brom at the end of last season to make a comment like that. And obviously with Carroll's contract out at Reading again in the middle of January, could be on the move back up there again. So let's see how that one.
It's the most productive temp worker in Britain. I like it. Just, fills in. It's good.
Isn't that the Chancellor of the Exchequer? No, we won't go into that. Anyway, right, loads of content for you guys to get involved with on theanalyst.com as we've been rolling through today. Great piece from Robbie Dunn here, one of our new writers on The Analyst, two sides of Barcelona, really explaining, as Ollie went into, about the challenges they've got. There is also a great look through from Tom Hancock about who's in better shape right now. Really worth diving into this one, not just for the subheadings of the words on the screen. And of course, there is as well the Viz, which everybody loves. You've seen some of the data in here so far, and you've seen some of the animations. Plenty more for you to dive into there as well, as of course your stats hub. Pretty much all the top European leagues now in here, and some other less top European leagues as well, available for you to dive through, be interactive with, and have a look around at. Right then, that wraps us up for this day today. Thank you very much for watching on YouTube, Twitch, and our Twitter channel, of course. And for all of you listening on podcasts, our great band of followers on there, we really do appreciate as well. Make sure you do rate, review, and subscribe to the show as well if you haven't already. Give us those 5-star reviews. Leave us some nice comments. Text us. Sorry, I meant to say Duncan was described last week as having wit as dry as the sands of Texas.
Well, yeah, there we go.
He certainly is one of our stars. Anyway, on behalf of Duncan and Ollie and myself, thanks very much for tuning in. We'll be back Monday when we'll look back over this momentous weekend of action. But until then, take care of yourself and goodbye.